I mean, I think for me, I often, a lot of my work would come under the category of a kind of, when I make kind of systems or I make models of things that don't necessarily work and not actually empirically true in the sense that they're not a correct model of something. But I have to say that over the years since I've started doing this, I was probably under the impression when I made something, when I started a journey with a piece, that it was probably quite a good model of something. But it's only in hindsight that I realised that model is quite flawed. For example, I've made it, and so there's as much about my own personal journey of discovery than actually putting the viewer first. And I think one of the problems about putting the viewer first is that you have to make an assumption of who that viewer is. And depending on your own experience, you either overestimate or underestimate who that person is. And so there's always a shifting idea of who the viewer would be in terms of your own prejudice and your own sort of experience. And generally I would underestimate, when I was younger, I underestimated my audience because I assumed they had a sort of knowledge similar to my own experience. And so it's kind of, there's always, you have to really make things for yourself really, because otherwise it just becomes really complicated. But anyway, so I have gone on certain journeys, like for example, I've made a lot of rope machines, which for me, when I was a young teenager and when I was a young student, I became very preoccupied by rope machines, and I wanted to make a system like that would try and I didn't know why I wanted to make that system, but I wanted to make a machine that would make a rope, and I was really obsessed with that process. And through making a rope machine, I realised that this was very much about my own perception of time as either a line or a cycle, and I was quite pleased at this sort of metaphor, but it was only really sort of later afterwards I realised this wasn't really a model of time at all. It was a sort of metaphor for time and the way we perceive it. And I've been sort of and it's one of the things that preoccupy my work is trying to visualise time. And really, one of the things that's sort of been quite interesting this week is that I've been trying to sort of I've been trying to push Matthew to help me sort of try and make a way that was less metaphorical, more kind of actual sort of. But really, I think one of the sort of conclusions that I've had to come to this week is unless you really understand mathematics and can write mathematics, you can't really understand time. You can only sort of experience it through metaphor and through your sort of consciousness. And so there are these sort of, which in a way sort of is discouraging, but also quite encouraging, because it just means that most of us are in the same boat in that sense. Sorry, I'm going a bit on a tangent here.
No, it's interesting. Perhaps an metaphor for what's been happening during the week, given your rope machines, is that it's been a kind of tug of war, and it's been very interesting to see Matthew pulling you sometimes willingly and sometimes unwillingly towards his understanding and his very precise way of understanding these concepts, and then you pulling back to get this kind of freedom to be able to make something that's more than simply a model. Because as you say, your works are never simply models intended to demonstrate a point.
But I think
this kind of interplay.
And actually, just listening to Matthew just now, I sort of realised there's another sort of common link in the sense that Matthew's book isn't just a sort of educational treatise, as a lot of these books are. They're not a sort of way of bringing science to the masses and saying how good it is, because it asks a lot of questions, and it brings up a lot of problems, and it doesn't, in terms of the sort of introductions and the forwards and the ideas raised, it creates questions rather than answers, in terms of which is, I hope, similar to my thing. So it's not just a pure model of how science sort of will encompass everything. It doesn't say it won't, but it's basically hinting at this fact that we haven't ever been able to find this way of solving this scatter of the primes. That there are bigger things at play than mathematics possibly, but also in the failure of my systems, in the failure of my models, that's where the real interest lies. And it's not, if I had potentially made a true model of time, it wouldn't be an artwork. If I had stumbled across that, so it's in a way, as an artist, I'm quite lucky that I'm lucky I'm an artist rather than a scientist, but vice versa as well, because they're not interesting as true models for me in terms of the art.
Well, this came up. This is quite a major point. Was when is a where is the boundary? When does a model which illustrates a scientific point become an artwork? So we were sort of we were exploring that boundary for a good part of the week, really, and that still hasn't been entirely resolved, but that's an interesting point that's come up.
Although in the actual project itself, in a sense, ended up staging that problem, didn't it? Because at a certain point, I think it would be fair to say that Conrad challenged everyone else on the team to make this model of what we'd be discussing, which we should go into. So Conrad kind of challenged us to make the model, which he then later on responded to in a very unexpected way. And so we did get this kind of image of the way in which one could begin with this concept and try in a very rigid way, if you like, to create a model of it. And then the fact that you were making a physical model of it would introduce all these other factors which would then feed back onto the way in which you were thinking about the subject. And I think that was really fascinating to see. But perhaps we should try to explain the problem that we ended up dwelling on. Do you think that's a wise idea?
Sure.
So one of the ways to approach this problem of the prime numbers is through the contrast between addition and multiplication. And perhaps Matthew will explain a little about why that's something that seemingly so elementary and simple contains something very mysterious and strange.
Okay. Well, addition and multiplication are they have something in common. They have several things in common. Both of them take two numbers, somehow combine them to create another number. Both of them are something you learned fairly early on in your life, even if you've never really got the hang of doing them very well. You still understood what they were supposed to do. Both of them are represented by a simple symbol. There's a button on your calculator that's the plus button, there's the times button. So you're sort of easily lulled into thinking these operations, as a mathematician would call them, are of the same category. They're the same category of thing. They're sort of arithmetic ways of combining of combining a pair of numbers to create a new number. But something that becomes apparent when you think about this enough is that there's something different, there's something categorically different about addition and multiplication. And it's the tension between them that creates the philosophical problem associated with the prime numbers. The irregular scatter that I described of the prime numbers is only present when you lay them out along a number line. Now, a number line in itself encodes the notion of addition. You're taking space and you're dividing it up into equal intervals, and the act of addition can be dramatized, I think that's the word we've been using this week, by simply walking along the number line. So if I want to add 3 plus 7, I can just walk 3 steps and then walk 7 steps. I've walked 10 steps. That's fairly straightforward. Or I can do it the other way around. I can walk 7 steps and then 3 steps. But in each case, the 3 and 7 are playing the same role. There are a number of steps. I can count 3 pebbles and 7 pebbles. I have 10 pebbles. This is uncontroversial. But if I want to dramatize 3 times 7, something else has to occur. I have to walk 3 steps, and then 3 steps, and then 3 steps, 3 steps, 3 steps, 3 steps, 3 steps. I've had to keep track of how many times I've walked 3 steps. I've walked 3 steps 7 times. The 3 and the 7 are doing completely different things. The 3 is a number of steps, and the 7 is the amount of times you've repeated that act of taking 3 steps. So there's what we call an iteration. You're taking the idea of adding and you're sort of turning it on itself. You're applying the number system to itself. And I've thought about this a lot because prime numbers only really come into being when you have multiplication.